degrees. So is Kisumu at 24 degrees as well. But it promises to be a relatively hot Friday later in the day. How hot is it where you are? We're definitely here to raise the temperatures for you. This is Morning Cafe.
It's definitely 13 degrees Celsius in Nairobi.
Oh yes, it's that chilly.
Oh, it is very chilly. But you know what? Speaking of all that, as you say, it is going to be a hot Friday, because here we serve it the best way we know how. Later on, because it's a Friday, or if you like it, a Friday, we'll be having some miondoko and all that later on.
Definitely. Good morning and welcome to Easy Friday. Of course, it's a day to loosen up a little bit as we wrap up the week in style. Do stick around for some music and some entertainment as well. Send in your request so that we can play that music for you as we continue with the show. Welcome to Morning Cafe. I'm Flora Limuki.
My name is Freddy Ndimuli.
And I'm Stanley Nyerungita, yours truly, Stanley Nyerungita. My Twitter handle at Nyerungita_2047 is our SMS number. You can also, throw in which particular kind of music do you feel like you really want to kickstart your day this morning. I think we'll really be trying to mix it up later on with what we, Flora and I, are used to, and what maybe Fred, you're used to back in the day.
Oh, you didn't just go there. It's too early in the day. It's too early in the day.
Anyway.
Well, it has been 3 days of intense demonstrations, and that forms our top story this morning. President William Ruto has termed the 3-day protest by the opposition Azimio la Umoja One Kenya coalition as economic sabotage, and affirmed that the government will not sit back and allow them to continue. Meanwhile, the Azimio leader Raila Odinga on his Twitter handle later yesterday said that definitely the demonstrations will continue today in what he described as the finals of the Maandamano Wednesday to Friday this week. A number of MPs from that coalition have been arrested. There are reports that some were picked up yesterday. At least we do understand that Embakasi East MP Babu Owino will be back in court this morning. He has spent the third night in custody. He's back in court this morning for bail hearing, and he was charged yesterday alongside 5 others, including Gaucho, for allegedly committing subversive acts. And that is our top story this morning. We'll keep updating you on the happenings as we go along. Now, before we take a look at the dailies, Flora has the day's diary.
Well, let's see what we have here. Of course, Azimio protest entered day 3, and well, the Azimio leader has been conspicuously missing. Let's see if we see him on the last day of the protest. Also, KEPSA decry effects of protest in businesses as Kenya loses billions of shillings to the protest. We also follow up on Babu Owino's, Babu Owino, Embakasi East Member of Parliament. Babu Owino remains in custody after being transferred from Wanguru Police Station to Milimani Law Courts yesterday. Further, President William Ruto to tour Murang'a County later today. And in sports, Gor Mahia FC kicked out of the Confederation of African Football Champions League. That is what we have as of now. And of course, another story we are following up on is the IMF, International Monetary Fund, has fronted that the Finance Act be passed, case be passed by the High Court, because this is good for Kenya's economy, even as we try to recover from the effects of COVID-19. That is what we have as of now, but we keep updating our diary as we move on.
Well, definitely. I feel like now we can get into the press review and what is happening in the dailies. We all have the Standard. We'll be taking a look at the Nation later on, and the People Daily. Well, remember yesterday, Q, what will you be expecting on the newspaper this morning, the Friday morning? And, well, again, as all of you had, quoted matters to do with Maandamano, the Standard this morning says, calm returns as focus now shifts to police action. There you have it on bold there. Right, there you have it there. Okay. So protest hotspots witnessed relative calm yesterday, with Azimio leaders failing yet again to show up, but insisting demos will go on, even as Kenyans counted the cost, with rights groups decrying police brutality. So at a glance, most parts of the country returned to normalcy as intensity of protests died down. Rights groups accuse police of brutality, claim existence of a killer squad. President says elected leaders will lead country, not fierce protests. Opposition vows demos to go on, assures that Raila Odinga, who is inside, is safe. Also, children in protest hotspots, except in Nyanza region, resume learning. Businesses cautiously reopen as previously empty streets come back to life. There's a whole special coverage of that from page 2 all the way to page 7. If you ask me, we were discussing a number of these things yesterday morning, and also to deal with the matters, children going back to school and resuming learning, and mostly in the hotspot areas, and also if we'll really see normalcy come back to life. That is what is on the Standard also. On the front page, also, or rather, the upper page, there's a whole matters good news for students on varsity cutoff, and also talks on use of tea harvesting machines stall. That is on page 21, matters devolution. And in sports, Kipyegon goes for another world record. We'll also be taking a look at what is inside in the lifestyle. That is on the Standard this morning.
Yeah.
We can I think deep
Interesting to see how many acres of space that the Standard has actually given to reporting on the demonstrations. 7 pages, including the front page. The first 7 pages are dedicated to news around the demonstrations. That's interesting. Let's take a look at the front page of the Daily Nation. Raila down with bird flu. Yeah, that's the front page of the Daily Nation this morning. Sounding frail and on an exclusive call with the Nation yesterday and appearing to breathe with slight difficulty, Azimio leader says he's on the road to full recovery after his no-show during anti-government protests on Wednesday and yesterday, and vows more protests against oppressive Ruto administration. Remember, one of the trending topics on Twitter yesterday was, where is Raila? Yes. Finally, he is on the front page of the Daily Nation today, and he explains his absence from the front lines of the demonstrations. He tweeted late last night and said the demonstrations will continue, and termed Friday as the finals of the Maandamano Wednesday to Friday that he should be leading. So we don't know. He did not indicate whether or not he'll be on the front lines again today, but definitely said he will be. The demos will continue. That headline on the Daily Nation is the same one on Taifa Leo. It says niliugua homa tu. Definitely downplaying the extent of his ailment. Yeah. He explains that, and as well, away from the Daily Nation and Taifa Leo, Business Daily. Ruto plots new car tax, VAT, if court cripples Finance Act. And that's an interesting read because remember, this issue is now before the courts. It could go either way. A 3-judge bench will determine this matter, but already government planning on other ways of raising revenue if at all it doesn't go their way. So Ruto plots new car tax and VAT if court cripples Finance Act.
Perhaps it's important to read part of what the IMF says concerning that Finance Act case in the High Court. On a statement they released yesterday, they say the approval of the financial year 2023-2024 budget and 2023 Finance Act are crucial steps to support ongoing consolidation efforts to reduce debt vulnerabilities while protecting social and development expenditures. However, recent challenges in resource mobilization and elevated uncertainty call for contingency plans that can be quickly deployed to ring-fence fiscal performance going forward. Tighter financing conditions also require prudent debt policy and continued efforts to prioritize concessional loans. So it's basically IMF giving like a way forward or a right and okay to pass the Finance Act case in the High Court, in a bid to, of course, help in the economic recovery for Kenya.
It's one of the biggest debates. Remember, the Catholic bishops the day before yesterday called for the repealing of the Finance Act as it is.
Yeah.
And so, well, if you see the government already looking for other ways, if at all it doesn't go their way, and the Catholic bishops saying it should be repealed, probably it's a debate that will continue into next week, depending on, of course, on how the court pronounces itself on that matter.
Yes, definitely. We also have the People Daily.
Yes, I have the People Daily. Calm returns amid queries over Raila. Well, I think the answer is on the Daily Nation, the front page of the Daily Nation. That has the answer on this query over Raila. Where was he yesterday? Businesses resume. MPs seized over demos remain in custody, even as questions emerge on the whereabouts of the Azimio top luminaries, because up until yesterday, we've seen Raila Odinga and the other Azimio luminaries lead from the forefront, from the front, and as far as the demos are concerned, even those that have taken place outside Nairobi. We saw the leaders actually take charge of demos, even in Kambani, but yesterday, none of them was showing.
But then it's interesting how yesterday there was a whole sum up of arrests, even from the protesters and even members of parliament, including Babu Wido. And there was also speculation, which we'll be confirming later on during the day, a number of members of parliament. I believe from Mathare, if I'm not wrong.
Mathare MP reports that he was picked up by police along Gong Road yesterday.
So we expect to see how all that will be playing along. Today, because as much as their leader was not present, so it was really left for this Azimio diehards and Azimio leaders to really lead these demonstrations in their respective constituencies and wherever they lead. But then now, after this whole arrest, will be it will be keen to see how the finals, quote unquote, how Azimio leader puts it, will turn out and will pan out.
Interesting, if we look at the kind of a theme across all those three headlines we've looked at, the Standard goes with calm returns, as focus now shifts to police action. You go to the People, calm returns amid queries of Raila, and then the Nation tells you where Raila is. So it appears there's a sort of agreement that relative calm is slowly returning across the country, and as far as the clashes are concerned, and we can quote the Standard on that, we can quote the People Daily on that, and on the big question, where is Raila? The Nation has answered you.
Yes. But it's interesting. Yesterday you were saying in Kenya politics changes even in an hour. So
a lot has happened.
A lot has happened, and a lot might even happen
within today. It's the last day and could be the grand finale. Probably he's been planning for the last day. We never know, but it's just a matter of wait and see. But on the Standard, on page 3, it comes to state fights back Azimio by arresting ringleaders. Babu Wino was informed the reason for the arrest, denied access to counsel, and most fundamentally, he was denied a right to be produced before a court in 24 hours. All these arrests kind of take us back to the election period last year, when now the people who are in the so-called Tanga side, and then there's this other side with the former president Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga, and we would see the people who are not supporting the then president being arrested. I hope this is not the case, because or if these Azimio leaders are arrested, let them be given tangible reasons for their arrest, because at the end of the day they all have right to protest and picket. But we shall see if they're given really tangible reasons of their arrest, if they at all caused any chaos or did what was not supposed to be done during the protest.
Certainly. Before we actually cross to any other, on the Standard, on page 2, on the left bottom, it says attempt to lift freeze orders on Finance Act flops, ruling on Friday. So just on the first paragraph, it says the Kenya Kwanza government must wait until next week to find out if the Court of Appeal will lift the freeze orders on the Finance Act 2023. This is a very dicey issue that, if you ask me, the Kenya Kwanza government and the Kenya Kwanza leaders are really, and the fingers crossed that really goes their way on this.
Understandably so, because there's a whole process of forming a government, and the argument by Kenya Kwanza has been that since the election day, since the president was sworn in, he has embarked on forming government.
Yes.
This is a very first budget that he's actually crafted with his team.
Yes.
That previously, up until now, he has been working with a budget that was formulated by the previous administration.
Yes.
So this was his first opportunity to actually come up with his own financial plan, and that is being delayed. You can definitely understand the kind of
The frustration
that such a government would feel, because definitely the process of forming government is not as easy as people would imagine.
Yes.
Coming on the backdrop of the number of roadside promises he had had for last year, by the way, last year at a time like this, roadside, promises. Remember, by the end of the day, you're supposed to do, a story, and you're supposed to know where Ruto was. And apparently he was in like 5 counties or even 4 counties that day. A number of promises made that entire time. So it really comes now to boil down to, okay, fine, you promised all this, now really want to see.
And give it to him. He's actually used that argument, and he said, yes, I promised, but yes, then allow me to come up with my own budget and do these things for you.
Yes.
So when you delay this budget, you delay this financial plan, then what happens?
You curtail his efforts.
Whether justified or not, but at least he's used that argument.
Absolutely. And if at all this government they've always complained that since they came into government, they found empty coffers. So if there's no money to do the development, then that is why you find us at a situation that we are in right now, protests going on because people are complaining about the high cost of living, but nothing can really move on if the government do not have the key to pass their 3.6 trillion shillings budget.
Okay, a quick look at other headlines now, probably from beyond our borders before we come back to discuss this. In Tanzania, Mwananchi, tume ya watoa hofu wananchi, and I wish I could actually get all the details about this story. Looks like a very interesting story that would matter to the people of Tanzania. Utekelezaji mapendekezo haki jinai, tume ya watoa hofu wananchi. That's a headline on the front page of Mwananchi in Tanzania. The Citizen, still in Tanzania, the front page, why criminal justice team is full of hope and confidence. The Criminal Justice Review Commission yesterday expressed confidence that its recommendations will be fully and successfully implemented by the government. That is as far as Tanzania news is concerned. Cross over to Uganda and look at what the Daily Monitor says. Yes, and I have the Daily Monitor. Among suspects housed in dispute over LC polls, Speaker of Parliament takes tough stand after the executive failed to provide a detailed explanation on the local council polls following expiry of term of office on July 10. Well, among is actually, I think, the name of the speaker. That's the word that I couldn't understand the headline because it says among suspends house in dispute over LC polls. So I've just figured out that among is actually the name of the speaker.
Right.
Interesting. That's what the Daily Monitor says. Of course, by yesterday we had already talked about what's headlining on the East African, Save Sudan, and the people, the Business Daily, it cuts across as well. Yeah, that's as far as the international news are concerned. We could come back and take a look at your favorite, the cartoons.
Before we get to that, I think we can, finish with that later. There was an interesting bit, and even it was, in our highlights, the flying taxes. Before we actually get to the cartoons, tell us more about the flying taxes, Fred.
Well, okay. Oh, yeah. Yes, we mentioned it in the... And thank you for reminding me this because it would have escaped our notice again. We mentioned it in the highlights this morning about what's happening in Brazil. And this is a report by the BBC that the Brazilian plane maker, Embraer, is planning to build a new factory in Sao Paulo, Brazil, to produce electric flying taxis which it hopes will take to the skies from 2026. Wow. Now, the aircraft to be made by its subsidiary Eve will resemble a small helicopter with enough space for up to 6 customers. It is envisaged that a trip will cost about 50 to 100 US dollars. That's 140 shillings. No, 1,400 shillings, maybe. And already they say that they've already received about an order for about 3,000 of the air taxis.
Right.
Yeah. The people already looking forward. You see, this is at least 3 years down the line.
Yeah.
Already orders are there, 3,000 air taxis.
Really?
Of course, most of them, or all of them, will not be used
Okay.
in South America. Of course,
Right.
a lot of them will go to Europe, to the United States. Embraer supplies a lot of these planes to Africa, the Middle East, and of course, some of the big airlines probably will be running this. Airlines like Qatar, what do you call it?
Emirates.
Emirates.
Oh,
yes.
yes.
When you come to Africa, of course, I don't know if KQ could actually
But then
try
I'm-
and get
But then I'm
to diversify their portfolio.
I'm really excited to even see such kind of innovation happening in Kenya, if it's going to come. And I'm pretty sure in the next few years, we really might see this. Maybe even 10 years ago, you'd be telling people that we might have electric vehicles, strolling around here. And the electric buses then like, nah, you're joking.
The speed at which technology is improving and changing is so fast. I can tell you, because you've been talking about my age, the fact that even the mobile phone,
Yes.
when I was in college, the mobile phone was actually a very foreign gadget. Very few people had it.
Yes.
I had to wait until I could get enough of my HELB loan for me to save up for a small phone. I think it was called Sagen or something like that. It could light up in blue and purple. Back then,
And the ones that had the... What is
that one came
Adrian.
much later. But you see now, where we are, we're talking about artificial intelligence. We're talking about mobile phones. We're talking about things that are changing so fast. And they're saying that this flying taxi will be, the prototype will be ready this year. So you could actually get to see the prototype.
Yes.
US regulators have already said that the taxis could start flying there in the US as early as 2025.
Interesting.
In 2 years' time.
Have you ever been in an electric bus?
No, I've seen them.
Uh-huh.
I don't think I've ridden in one.
You've not, Flora?
Not yet.
It's quite, though I've not really got the whole experience.
How was the experience?
of a
Because I
journey.
saw you were in one during, there's a feature story you did.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting. It is quite comfortable. It's not the typical, nganyas that you're used to. The whole kind of rowdy matatas that you're used to be in, the loud music. This one is really comfortable, even the experience. But then the bigger picture here is, as a country, the whole electric, beat. And most of the companies that are charging, even for the buses, they are partnering with the KPLC. So KPLC says that they can power about, I think, was it about 5,000 buses overnight, because there's lower usage of power during the night and lower tariffs and all that. So it's going to be interesting to have even more. And this comes on the backdrop of even the president saying that he's expecting to roll out electric motorbikes, electric motorcycles September, around September, end of this year. So by December we really need to have this particular conversation again, and have a whole look and feel of where have we come so far in matters electric mobility. But generally I can really say I'm excited to see what the future holds.
Absolutely.
Yes, we're looking forward to electric motors which will reduce noise and pollution, because even the vehicles and the air taxis, the promise is that they'll be 100% electric, allowing for emission-free flights. Carbon emissions, a big discussion, especially with climate change activists. And it's something that can put actually the smiles on their faces. So before we take a break, and when we come back today, we're going to be hosting three gentlemen for our main discussion for youth in politics. Ahmed Kader, a political analyst and blogger, Kenny Odueo, leadership and governance enthusiast, and Ndong Evans, a public law analyst. Do stand by for that after the break. But before that, I'm sure Stanley Nyaringita will not allow us to go to the break without looking at the cartoons today.
Okay, I don't know if your director will permit me maybe some 2 minutes. We take a look at a quick, okay, gives us 1 minute. We can start with the Daily Nation, which is even on that particular screen. It is local, it is self-explanatory. I believe that is CJ Madakome, or maybe, the Chief Justice, someone from the judiciary. And there's also the whole signpost, Finance Bill 2023, and the yellow car. So I believe that is President William Ruto and Rigathi Gachagua. There's a whole drawn block right there. It is quite interesting and self-explanatory right there. I'll start with you, Fred. What do you think of this?
I'm trying to understand what that...
the cartoon this morning.
The cartoon
shows.
On the Daily Nation. I think it talks about the justice. Of course, it's about the finance bill.
Can take a look at which?
Page 16 of the Daily Nation. It's a caricature trying to tell the story about what's happening with the finance bill that's already before the courts. And you see, I think the Attorney General there, the CJ, and a small taxi. A yellow one.
Definitely.
With the plates KK.
Even the viewers can take a look at. Flora, what do you think? You're really close to it.
For me, it's like what I can get from this. Someone is trying to reach out to Mother Koome, but she tells him, Ngoja kidogo, I have to deal with this. Then I'll talk to you a little bit later.
Right.
Yeah. And then there's the whole Kenya Kwanza and a car adorned in Kenya Kwanza in UDA colors. It's like the president is trying to catch up. This is Eji Muturia.
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely...
Yeah, of course, trying to...
caricature that looks like.
Yes, yes. The government.
You can never be sure.
Yeah. Like, ngoja muturi kidogo. I need to deal with this and I'll come back to you later. It's interesting.
Okay, let's now take a break. When we come back, we'll have the three gentlemen in studio. Youth and politics will be talking about the state of the nation. What do the younger politicians or analysts think about what's happening to the country, today being the third day of the 3-day man-the-man of this week. You're watching Morning Cafe. We'll be back.
We are there to inform you. When the bullets are flying, we tell you who's shooting and why. Reporting on your victories, your health, your money, your security, your past, present, and future. We are interested in telling the stories of creativity, hard work, and resilience that you are known for.
That is our job. This is my job. My name is Victor Muyakane, and it's my honor to bring you this news this way every Thursday night on the home of Untold Stories.
They say money makes the world go round. So let's slow things down a bit. Put things in perspective. From the markets to the streets to the stocks, we make the complex comprehensible. Join me, Hibak Saeed, on TV 47 Business News for market insights like never before.
Siasa bila uongozi bora ni sawa na mfupa bila nyama.
Hiyo mashindano ni mashindano ya urembo ama ya kazi.
Hiyo itahakikisha kwamba kila Mkenya ako ndani ya bima ya matibabu.
Kila siku ya Jumanne kwenye kipindi cha Matukio Mtambuko, ungana nami Paul Kirobi tukujuze yanayojiri katika kaunti zote 47. Tujadili maswala komavu.
Kwa kubwa shikamoni, kwa wadogo marhaba, ndizo salamu kutoka ukanda wa Pwani.
Jina langu ni Kombo Alfayo, nikiripotia runinga ya TV 47.
Jina langu ni Abdulaziz Nameka kutoka kaunti ya Lamu.
Jina langu ni Paula Munio.
Ungana nami Isaac Famba kutoka kaunti hii ya Trans Nzoia.
Kutoka kaunti ya Kakamega, jina langu ni Violet Auma.
Nikiripotia runinga ya TV 47 kutoka mjini Naivasha kwenye kaunti ya Nakuru, mie ni Willy Dennis Njiru.
Usikose.
From the heart of the city to the walls of power and the corridors of justice. News and newsmakers. We live in a world where a lot is happening around us. It is crucial we make sense of what's happening. Information is power, information is knowledge.
Well, we still expect another gentleman to be joining us, but even before that, we can still continue with this discussion. A quick look at the headlines. Calm returns as focus now shifts to police action. And a lot has been said about police action, and even the commentary on some of the TV stations yesterday, even on the media, even civil society, and on the inside pages of The Standard, I can see human rights groups say militia infiltrated Azimio demonstrations. They also accuse police of using private militia to unleash terror on protesters. Police have denied that, but the fact remains that a number of people have lost their lives, some of them to gunshot wounds. Some people are still nursing gunshot wounds across the country. Definitely there has been death. Some of this death has been blamed on the police, and so we could focus on the police action as well. What do you make of the police action so far? You've seen how they've been treating protesters. You've seen the arrests and the manner in which those arrests have been undertaken. We've seen what has happened to people being taken to court. We've seen even some of the police acting or pretending to be journalists in order for them to effect arrests. And are we justified to actually call out the police? Let's start with you, Nong.
Yes, Fred, I think we are having a very big problem. I think it's a very, very sad day for the country, owing to what we have been seeing, especially yesterday, the report by the human rights groups. We have lost close to 30. This is day 3, and I think I would first begin by saying condolences to the families that have lost their loved ones. I think, Fred, this is not new. The state has been a savage for a very long time, and the police actions cannot be justified under any circumstances, because the role of the police under the right to protest is facilitative. It's not combative, you know. But what we have seen is, even before then, even before we talk about, I mean, the opposition came out to officially announce that the protests are going to be nationwide. The police were already upfront. They were saying, we are not going to allow, you know. And some of the reasons you can really see, we get to this circle after every 5 years. We are at a point where our police force doesn't understand the import of Article 37 of the Constitution. We are at a point where we are very reactionary as a country, and the politics around demonstration, the politics around outlawing demonstration keep haunting us after every five years. You know, in 2017, we were here. I mean, first in 2013, we were here. In 2017, we are here. In 2022, we are at the very same point of police brutality. In circumstances that you clearly see, there is no justification that the police can give for their actions. We have seen live bullets, you know. The state
the role of the police in terms of how they regulate demonstration must be proportionate to the legitimate aim that they want to achieve.
Yes. Yet there are those who argue that even the police themselves have borne the brunt of some of the actions by protesters, because we've seen them being stoned, we've seen them being targeted. A case in point, I saw a video, I'm not sure if it was in Kisii or elsewhere, where the demonstrators were actually chasing police away and they were running after them. Police also do have a right to protect themselves, but how far can they go with this?
Thank you very much. And I think I'll start by saying and telling Kenyans that different trades and professions have different trainings. As a journalist, there's some training that you're subjected to enable you to do your job effectively and effectually. Every trade has. The police, there's training they go through. Part of it is instinctive reactions, where as an officer, you have a right. Actually, not just even as a human being, as an officer, that's why you're issued with a firearm. That firearm is not for threatening people. That firearm is part of the instruments of maintaining security, not just for the officer, but for the general public. Two, I would like to bring to the attention of Kenyans, and I think many of us have seen. I'm not playing devil's advocate. I'm also trying to bring to the attention of Kenyans that we've seen police officers running away with guns. Those people are not cowards. And it's usually said, do not mistake the cowardice of a man who runs, what is the word? Do not mistake a man who runs away for a coward. He might be saving your life. So we need to have that balanced view of things. And Wakili has mentioned about Article 37. One of the reasons why I walk around with this book is because these people can threaten you and really harass you. So if you don't have it in your head, you can have a hard copy. I'll also like to bring to his attention and the attention of Kenyans of Article 24 of the Constitution of the Republic of Kenya that expressly provides for limitations to those rights. One of them that is very basic is that you have the liberty to exercise your right, but only to the extent that it does not stop me from exercising mine. You cannot impose your problems on me. You cannot impose your pains on me. You have a right to picket. If I am not interested in picketing, I have a right to go on with my normal life. I have a right in access to health. I have a right to access health when I feel like I need it. But when your demonstration or your picketing hinders me from doing that, then Article 24 supersedes Article 37.
Yes.
And I think also to mention something, you realize that we condemn the excessive use of force, and we are sorry for the people who have lost their lives. But I think the law can never apply without honesty and common sense. I believe the law is a subject of common sense, not the other way around. I would like to ask a question, because sometimes you realize that there has been claims of infiltration of these peaceful protests by thugs. On most occasions, they are always associated with the government. But I would like to ask one simple question. You realize that we've seen destruction of property. The question sometimes I ask is, you see people, maybe those ones that are called infiltrators, causing mayhem. But then when maybe they are shot, they quickly turn from the infiltrators to the peaceful protesters. I've never understood into victims. Because on one side, we need to choose a side. As a person, I believe we have all those rights. But we must also exercise them in a space of reality.
And because, yes, you've talked about the limitation of rights and fundamental freedoms. Chapter 4 is very clear. And of course, the legal minds will always tell you the law is very clear. Whether it's clear or not is another thing altogether. But going back to chapter 4, and Article 37 on assembly, demonstration, picketing, and petition. Every person has a right, peaceably and unarmed, and probably those are the key words, peaceably and unarmed, to assemble, to demonstrate, to picket, and to present petitions to public authorities. We saw a young member of the public holding a placard yesterday, and he was arrested immediately because this was captured on camera as he held a placard, and the journalists were asking him, can you please hold your placard up so that we take the pictures? And police came and took him away, and they said, you are holding an illegal protest. It is the understanding of the law. When it comes to chapter 4, and every person has a right to peaceably and unarmed. This gentleman was not armed. This gentleman was not causing mayhem anywhere. He was just holding a placard. But the police officer who arrested him was heard saying, you are holding an illegal demonstration. Is there anything like an illegal demonstration?
You know, Fred, again, as I said, Article 37 it puts the role of the police to be facilitative. What the role of the police under Article 37 should be is that once the police, and there is a procedure under the Public Order Act, the procedure of notifying the police the intention to hold a peaceful protest, as the opposition has been doing. The problem we have been having is that even if that is done in good time, the police will still come out. We've seen the regional commander, Mr. Bungei, come out clearly and say, these protests are not going to be allowed, they are illegal, even in circumstances where that reasonable notice has been given in good time. And so the opposition, I think they reached a point with the police and said, no, I think we are not going to be in the business of doing this anymore. What we are going to do is that we are going to hold our protests nevertheless. But even in those circumstances, I understand the law to be that if, for instance, 10 people are demonstrating in a group peacefully, as the law mandates them to do, and 2 of them turns violent, it is the role of the police to whisk away the 2 who are violent within that group. It is not justified under any circumstances for the police now to turn around and say, you know, I am carrying my placard. You know, when you look at that provision, there are 3 parts. The legal obligation that comes with it is that you have to remain peaceful throughout the protest. Again, it gives you the right of assembly, it gives you the right to picket, and even to present petitions to any authorities for whatever nature and in whichever manner you wish. If you, for instance, carry a placard carrying a message, you know, and you believe, actually, you can even demonstrate one person, and the police should not interfere. Now, what is the reasonable limitation to that right? Is it enough to say the way he said that, for instance, if you don't notify the police in good time, you know, there is this term I've heard around called illegal protest. A constitutional right by its very nature cannot be illegal. It can only be limited. We cannot have an illegal protest.
Is the argument, therefore, that the requirement or the need to notify the police is only in instances where you require police facilitation? That if I am to demonstrate and I'm alone, I do not require any police assistance to actually carry my placard or to ensure that traffic is stopped for me, then I do not really need to notify them.
Yes, and I think you are very right. You know, right now, we do not have an act of parliament that is giving meaning to, you know, an expansive meaning to Article 37. But taken as it is, I would tell you, if I am to live here and carry a placard, the way I've seen a number, we have seen Eric Omondi come out, you know, along Parliament Road. We have seen several other people coming out and saying, really, this is what I want to tell this government. This is what I want to, you know, to advocate for under Article 37. I understand that provision that the Public Order Act, that the very reason why you have to inform the police is not the police, you know, to come and disrupt your demonstration. You inform them for facilitation. If I am one person and I decide to go and demonstrate along Parliament building, I do not need police, you know, provided that I will remain peaceful The obligation under that provision is to remain peaceful. Again, I have seen the state, I mean, especially Parliament, I've seen several members of Parliament, they want to now bring a bill, to give meaning to Article 37. And I've looked at that bill from a cursory look, and I can tell you, it will be unconstitutional at the end of the day. A limitation that is to limit any fundamental right must be justifiable in a reasonable and an open democratic society.
Kennedy, there seems to be a lack of understanding of the law. Quite a number of young people are taking part in these protests, and you've seen in areas like Mathare, in areas like Kibra, you can see that the age that cuts across is people in their early 20s, late teens, and probably a few late 20s. So definitely these are young people. Article 37 is a very short one. Every person has a right to peaceably and unarmed to assemble, to demonstrate, to picket, and to present petitions to public authorities. Do you think that people really understand this, that those people taking part in the protests understand where their rights begin and end?
I think before I answer that, I would like to ask Wakili, what is the purpose of notification? Why are you coming to notify me? Why do we notify the police? What if one of the reasons is to facilitate, is to talk of facilitative? The question is, what if you notify the police and then they are engaged on other matters of public priority? And they tell you, because of we are engaged in Marsabit, we may not be able to facilitate, considering he talked about traffic and other issues. What happens in those circumstances? Back to your issue, I would like to, before I answer it, I would like to tell the Kenyan young people that if you don't understand Chapter 1 and Chapter 4 of the Constitution, don't even step out to go and demonstrate.
Do you think those ones who are already taking part, today is day 3, the ones we've seen taking part in the demonstrations yesterday, the day before yesterday, and probably will do so today, understand Chapter 4?
They don't understand. I am of the opinion that I think that's part of the public capacity building and education that we need to do to sensitize our young people. Because you realize that I've talked about this before. Those people, there are people out there who are fighting for their rights. But if you are to ask to stop them and ask them which right, they won't answer you that question. So as of this moment, some of these challenges we are having, you've talked about the shortest article. We're talking about peacefully and unarmed. When these people step out, at first, most of them, or some of them will step out, like we've seen on TV and in these newspapers. Most of them are fairly armed. You see some of them carrying stones for purposes I don't know. You see some of them as early as 6. Even on Tuesday night, some roads were blocked as early as midnight. So I don't know at what point that infiltration or the police caused that. Case in point here, we are looking at a situation where most of these people, like you've said, do not understand that. And it's high time we need to either sensitize them, or the leaders or the callers of the demonstrations, or anyone planning to picket or organize such a thing, informs those they are communicating to, so that they come out with that knowledge in mind to avoid this confrontational kind of picketing and demonstrations that are not actually in the Constitution, because that's not what we are seeing on TV. What you're seeing in the papers is not what the Constitution envisions. And like I said, you can blame where it comes from. They blame the mongoose and they also blame the chicken. So we need to find a balance between the two, so that as we step out, we are alive to our responsibilities and obligations, so that we don't find ourselves in a situation where we look like, I think there is something called preparation to commit a felony. There are people who turn out for peaceful protests in a manner likely to suggest that they are preparing to commit a felony. Or there are people who turn out with the expectation that the security forces or someone is coming to attack them. And this is fairly based on lack of knowledge and understanding of that article.
And they do this in the guise that they are protected by Article 37, that they have the right to protest and assemble and picket and demonstrate. Because the key words here, Evans, are peaceably and unarmed. We've seen people throwing stones. Definitely that's an element of being armed, arguably. Peaceably. Now, probably that's where the contention could be. Because if I'm shouting on the streets, am I being peaceable? What would your argument be if at all I'm shouting, if at all I'm actually performing stunts and somersaults across the road? Would that be judged as being peaceable?
I think fast forward, before I answer you on what can be said to amount to, picketing and demonstrating peaceably under that provision, I have to first respond. He asked my brother asked a very important question, and he asked, what if you notify the police and then the police tells you, we have other engagements and therefore we are not able to provide you with security? First, I want to say that the Constitution 2010, Fred, reflects so many things. It came to remove us from a history of state emasculation. It came to remove us from a history where there was abuse of power. It came to pacify that history and give us a new beginning. And that's why, the Constitution 2010 has been widely described as very progressive and transformative all across Africa. And therefore, I would tell you without any fear of contradiction that there can never be any bigger public interest than to protect the law, protect what is enshrined in the law. The police actions, by just saying we are engaged somewhere, we are busy, we are not able to provide security, cannot oust Article 37.
Their absence does not void the need for the demonstration.
It cannot. It will definitely not make void the need for demonstration at all. The limitation a limitation to any fundamental right must meet the master of Article 24. And there are a number of issues that have been listed outside there if you want to limit a fundamental right. Courts have said in this country time and again that standard is very high. You cannot abrogate it by just some flippant reason by saying I cannot provide security. But even more key to this discussion is the fact that we are seeing a very funny trend for the first time in history. And I'm saying this is a very historical moment, and we are negatively in bad light because of this history. The state is saying that because the opposition has called protests all across the country, you saw that PG meeting at State House, and they were saying, look, we are going to also organize other people to counter the protests. So then, even if you were to use that standard against Article 37, the right to protest, you'd ask, so who does the police protect in those circumstances? Because our people have come out to demonstrate. Our people have come out to show that we are not happy with this, we are not happy with this. The government is saying they're also organizing a different group to counter these people. So then, it means, ideally, these people, the counter-protesters, have taken the place, of disruptors. They are actually saying, they are also expressing their rights by countering people that already have prepared to demonstrate. It ideally means they want to deny them the opportunity, to present their petitions in whatever nature. And back to your question, what is the standard of what can be said to be peaceably and unarmed? And I want to say, that Public Order Act, it has a bit that it has defined what amounts to a weapon. Mm-hmm. It is very interesting that a stone is not part of what is mentioned as a weapon. But does that then justify my interpretation of a stone not to fall within that category? Mm-hmm. Of course, it can cause harm. It can cause harm.
It can cause destruction to some extent.
It can cause, even to property, really. So, if I go on the streets of Tomboya, if I go to Tomboya streets today and begin shouting, I do not think that is a breach of peace. You see, I understand a breach of peace to have some necessary element of harm, either economic harm, either physical harm, either interference, with transportation and all the other, the normal functioning in terms of social, political, and economic order of the country. And therefore, if you ask me, And that is why we need a provision. We need an act of parliament to give meaning to Article 37. What I've seen being proposed is akin to what we saw, with the Security Laws Amendment Act of 2016 that were later nullified. I have seen proposals such as, limiting the number of people that are going to a demonstration. I doubt, and I highly doubt, from a legal standpoint, if that will pass the muster of Article 24 on limitations.
Of course, any further legislation cannot come in to counter the wording of the Constitution. After the break, we'll be looking at Article 24 on the limitations of rights and fundamental freedoms, because there seems to be a lack of understanding on some of the wordings of the Constitution in as far as demonstrating is concerned, picketing. But a number of young people are in Parliament right now, legislators, very young, some of them in their early 30s, also taking part in this, and they appear very excited, and some of them may be accused, whether right or wrong, of being extremists. Yes, especially the first-time legislators, both in the Senate and in the National Assembly. Do you think that even they lack an understanding of what their role is as parliamentarians, or do they also understand these wordings of the law, especially on the fundamental rights and freedoms?
Thank you very much, Fred. Before I jump to that, I think I'm very surprised that Wakili says that shouting does not lead to any breach of peace or damage. I'm imagining if you're shouting next to a school or a hospital, I'm trying to imagine what that can cause to the children. If I'm trying to imagine if that's not enough distraction, then what is? Coming to our young legislators, I think there's a bit of ignorance in quotes, ignorance of purpose in our young legislators, who sometimes get overexcited when they get there, lose sense of purpose for why they are there. And it's a sorry state. Sometimes that's why it becomes very difficult to sell youth as a qualification into anything or a justification for appointment or anything. But at the end of the day, we look at our wholesome system as a country, and we realize that I feel like our politics is rigged to act in a specific way, such that you hear people talking about good people becoming like the rest, which is a very sorry state. But then it begs the question, do these people understand the purpose for which they are elected, for which they aspire, the challenges that maybe the fellow young people face in the same aspirations? Because I'm speaking as someone who has been to the ballot, and I know there are a lot of challenges that face young people. So I feel, sometimes I feel very disappointed in my fellow youthful people. I'm not a youth myself.
You've crossed that line.
I'm a young elder, so I focus.
Welcome to this side of society.
Thank you. So I feel like our young people need to do more. It's possible to be different it's possible to be different and still achieve the purpose for which you are elected. Uh-huh. And that's always my call to our young people.
And I'm sure Evans will want to respond to whether or not shouting on the street could be considered a breach of the peace enough to get you arrested by police for defying the rights of others, probably with regard to Article 24 on limitations of rights. If I'm shouting, am I actually infringing on your rights as a person next to me? We'll also be looking at the conduct of politicians currently and their failure to actually provide leadership in the quagmire that we find ourselves in. Are they just playing politics for the sake of it? Let's now take a break. You're watching Morning Cafe on TV 47.
Tuko nawe mchana
The news that matters the most is the one that hits close to home. When disasters strike, we are there to inform you. When the bullets are flying, we tell you who's shooting and why. Reporting on your victories, your health, your money, your security, your past, present, and future. We are interested in telling the stories of creativity, hard work, and resilience that you are known for.
That is our job. This is my job. My name is Victor Muyakane, and it's my honor to bring you this news this way every Thursday night on the home of Untold Stories.
They say money makes the world go round. So let's slow things down a bit. Put things in perspective. From the markets to the streets to the stocks, we make the complex comprehensible. Join me, Hibak Said, on TV47 Business News for market insights like never before.
Siasa bila uongozi bora ni sawa na mfupa bila nyama.
Hiyo mashindano ni mashindano ya urembo ama ya kazi?
Hiyo itahakikisha kwamba kila Mkenya ako ndani ya bima ya matibabu.
Kila siku ya Jumanne kwenye kipindi cha matukio mtambuko, ungana nami Paul Kirobi tukujuze yanayojiri katika kaunti zote 47.
He's unwell and has taken a bed rest, and he said this to the nation yesterday. This follows his lack of show at the protests in the city. The opposition leader did not show up at the anti-government protests. Says he traveled to the coast last week and spent the weekend there nursing what he said was a terrible flu. Of course, we keep on following updates on this top story, including the appearance of Embakasi MP Babu Owino at the courts later this morning. Let's now get social media feedback by Flora.
Well, we'll be looking at some of the feedback from Facebook, from our viewers. And of course, the top trends on Twitter this morning is Mandamano demonstrations, as well as Raila Odinga. Of course, Kenyans asking where he has been since he has not shown up for the last 2 days in the Azimio protests that have been going on. But looking at some of the feedback from our viewers here on Facebook, Choche Kanavule says Kenyans are ready to sacrifice whatsoever be in ensuring that Zakayo's punitive taxes doesn't see the light of the day. And Erastus Mwene says, don't block your blessings by seeking revenge on people that wronged you. Let it go and trust God to fight all your battles. The government should focus on enhancing convergence leadership, not scrutiny and blackmail, because coward revenge while intelligence people reason. I presume this is in relation to the arrest of Embakasi Member of Parliament Babu Owino, among other allegedly arrested leaders of the Azimio faction. That is just what we have right now. But keep on interacting with us. #Morning Cafe at TV47 Kenya on Facebook, at TV47 News on Twitter, at Limuki_F, at Fred Indimuli, Nyaringita_, and our SMS line is 22047. Keep on interacting with us, and we'll be sampling your feedback later on. Freddy?
Thank you, Flora. We're still in studio with Kennedy Oduoyo, leadership and governance enthusiast, and Ndong Evans, a young legal scholar and public law analyst. And we're just trying to examine the level of understanding of the law and the Bill of Rights, the provision thereof, and the limitations as well. And just looking at Chapter 4, Article 24, Limitation of Rights and Fundamental Freedoms. Allow me, I know sometimes this legalese is not the best kind of language. It doesn't really make for a good read. You sometimes need to read and reread a sentence once or twice, even 7 times before you get anything. And sometimes you end up with nothing. So let me just read. Article 24. It's a long one, a bit longer than Article 37. 1, a right of or fundamental freedom in the Bill of Rights shall not be limited except by law, and then only to the extent that the limitation is reasonable and justifiable in an open and democratic society based on human dignity, equality, and freedom, taking into account all relevant factors, including the nature of the right of fundamental freedom, the importance of the purpose of the limitation, the nature and extent of the limitation, the need to ensure that the enjoyment of rights and fundamental freedoms by all individuals does not prejudice the rights and fundamental freedom of others, and the relation between the limitation and its purpose, and whether there are less restrictive means to achieve the purpose. Now we juxtapose this limitation with Article 37. Article 37 on fundamental, just a moment, yes, Article 37, if I could get it, that guarantees the right to demonstrate peaceably and unarmed, picket, and present petitions to the authorities. And just before the break, we were talking about a person shouting in public, and the debate was on whether or not that can be considered a breach or an infringement on the right of others.
Well, I still stand by my position on this matter because, you know, very many times the law has been said to be clear, but the law is not actually clear in its essence, and that's why I said there is need for a legislation. I began by saying there is indeed need for a legislation. To the best of my understanding, I think the only thing that I know within the penal code, which is a criminal offense, is disorderly conduct that is provided for under section 182 of the penal code. Beyond that, we also have to look at what is the history of demonstration and picketing. If, for instance, you were to come up with a law that prevents people from shouting while demonstrating, then what is the essence? Because, you see, demonstration itself, picketing, and presentation of petitions, then we will have to ask ourselves very, very many questions in that provision. Under what will be the mode of communicating our petitions? Either to authority, because a petition can actually be written, or you can petition by word of mouth. So, assuming you are to come up with a law, an act of parliament that says there is no shouting during demonstration, in the guise of saying that would be a breach of peace, the question then we need to ask is, what is the model of presenting petition? Because as I began, I said that provision, that Article 37 has 3 parts. There is the legal obligation for whoever wishes to demonstrate, picket, that is to do so peaceably. The second part is that you have a right to assemble. So then you do not, that provision envisages so many things. When it says you have a right to assemble, it also envisages that you can actually picket as one person or as an assembly. You see? It moves ahead to talk about presentation of petitions, which can either be oral or can be written. So, assuming you were to take the provisions of Article 24 and come up with a law that says you are not supposed to be shouting, you know, while demonstrating, that would fall short, you know, of Article.
It then curtail the presentation of that petition.
Yes, it then curtails the most important bit, which is presentation of petition, and then it says to authorities. That again is a big issue, because I've had a discussion, as my brother said. He said that, for instance, if you're shouting next to a school, you know, would it not be, you know, disruptive to the pupils? That is arguable, and I agree with him. So that when we have an act of parliament that gives meaning to that provision, we have had proposals, for instance, allocating certain places, allocating, you know, once you notify the police, allocation of certain zones, certain places, specifically for, you know, for demonstration, picketing, and presentation of petitions. But to the extent that the Constitution allows presentation of petitions to the authorities, it also admits that you have a right, you know, to go to the land office, to the authorities. You have a right to go and report to Harambee Avenue and tell them, you know,
to State House?
Now that is a different question because State House is actually one of the protected areas. So it would really be very interesting if you go and demonstrate around State House. Of course, I don't think that it can be illegal. What I think is that if you follow the requirements of Article 37, you get to and Raila has done this. You remember in the first wave of this protest, there was a people's petition that was supposed to be presented to State House, and it had a number of things, you know. And actually, I remember Raila coming on record and saying, you know, we have presented our written memoranda as the petition of the people. So those provisions of Article 24 are very strict. You know, the politicians can talk outside here. They can say we are coming up with a law to restrict this, that, and this. But be sure, any law and act of parliament to regulate Article 27 cannot derogate from it. It can only give meaning.
Kennedy, a response to that?
I think when we were starting, I mentioned that the law should be a servant of common sense. And to find ourselves arguing about the fact that we have to debate whether shouting in my ears can burst my eardrum and deprive me of my right to health should be debatable, that's another story. I think he's mentioned about history. I think the over-glorification, we are so stuck in history that the present is just leaving us behind. We are talking about AI, and we are still talking about, crying about what the colonialists did to us. When will we get to that point where we stop burying our heads so much in our history? Yes, there were injustices that were done unto us. People paid for them. So what? Are we going to continue crying because there were injustices and then do nothing and leave our children to continue doing the same? I think as a generation of young people, we need to stop these overemphasis. Yes, it's good to understand our history, but we need to perspectivify the present and invest in the future. We are at a point as a country where we know, we don't need to remind us every time about our history, but we are ready to move forward. Why can't we move forward? We have a constitution by itself. There is Article 37. My friends, we don't need a law to restrict it. Article 24 already restricts. Article 37. What other law do we need? Like I asked, why are you coming to notify the police if you don't need their help? I have seen procession marches by the Salvation Army. They have their marshals. Those marshals are well positioned to even direct traffic, to keep all their people in line. As a person, if that's what I see that in line with Article 37. That's what I would expect. If you don't need the police, then provide alternative avenues of ensuring that you don't infringe on my right. So that when you have people infiltrating these demonstrations to loot a supermarket, you have those marshals, like I see with the Salvation Army, who are going to stop that or identify them.
Self-regulating?
Self-regulation. You can, yes, that's what is in Article 37. When you talk about peaceably and unarmed, that is self-regulation. You don't go out in anticipation of war and expect not to fight. Because this, you've heard about kuuza woga. Today, people are staying at home for fear. Because when you look at what is happening on TV, which is unfortunate, then it becomes very difficult for you to step out there. I would like to bring to my attention of my brother that the law must be applied wholesomely. The problem we have as a country is the convenient application of the law. We choose one article that suits our interests and we run away with it. Yes. We forget about all others. We are actually here arguing about restrictions. And yet we have Article 27 that says, I, as Odweyo Kennedy, have a right to enjoy my right, regardless of how. Yeah, that is already there, but we are debating it. So, Fred, I think as a country, and especially as young people, we need to get to a point where there were issues in the past. We take responsibility. That is what people who want change do. That's what people who are trying to correct the messes of the past do. They remember their history and keep it in their mind. They don't use that as a tool to advance, whether personal or societal interest. And that's where we get lost. That's where this conversation, we have challenges as a country, but we distort the real conversations when we overemphasize on the past more than the future. Because as a country, I want to tell you for free, Fred, even without this constitution, if we just use common sense, we will propel ourselves to the, if we accepted that we can be civil, we can be reasonable and decide we don't want these problems. And even from our small capacities, we can achieve that, my brother.
Civil, reasonable, are those adjectives that you can use for the Kenyan society, even for our politicians? And gentlemen, that's a conversation I want us to go to now. The fact that we see our politicians acting in a certain way. These are people who were elected by different constituencies that are not necessarily homogeneous. People, brilliant young men and women elected from all 290 constituencies across the country to go represent them in parliament. But 8 months, 9 months, 10 months down the line, are we seeing them acting in the way we expected them to? Because they've been accused of playing politics for the sake of it, politics for the sake of politics. We find ourselves in a situation where Kenya needs a solution out of the quagmire we find ourselves in. We look up to our leaders to provide the way forward. Are they doing so? Yes? Probably that's why we are seeing the demonstrations. I want you to actually do an assessment of the kind of political leadership we have right now, not the administrative leadership, political leadership. The members of the National Assembly, the members of the Senate, the members of the county assemblies, and probably even the president and opposition political leadership of the Azimio coalition. Let's start with you.
Very good question, Fred. You know, apart from the fact that I'm an enthusiast of the law, I am also alive to the political dynamics of our society. And the conversation in the politics, how the politics have been played in this country, is a conversation nobody wants to have. Because, let me tell you, Fred, we have been here for too long. We have been here for too long. This problem is actually a planned problem. You know, even beginning from corruption, bad political leadership, it's usually planned. And it's planned from the way our politics have been structured. Fred, if you go to a country like Sweden, if you go to most of the Scandinavian countries, Finland, politics is not a full-time job. It is because it is not lucrative. But in this country, we have made our politics to be very lucrative. The only way you want to get rich faster is to get into politics. I mean, every other person will tell you that we have played the politics, we have glorified, evil, in the political balance. And that has continued for too long. And if you look at the young people that are being elected to parliament today, and we have good example. I'll begin by saying, look at somebody like Sakaja when he was nominated as a senator, in 2013. Look at Edwin Sifuna, when he was just given the Secretary General of ODM in 2015. There is hope in this country, but there is a lot of despair right from our ballot process. Ethnicity has been used by the political class. Fred, I would tell you, as the young people, as the people, we are not ethnic. But our politics of ethnicity has led us to a point where I believe you have heard the quote. People saying, we are going to the ballot. He is our thief. You better leave us with our thief. It is our time. It's ours. We own him. So we have actually owned, the rot in our society as a people. And the problem with that is that our democracy is very problematic. It's very difficult to regulate democracy. It's very difficult to regulate democracy. And that's why it has been said time and again that democracy is some level of madness. It's some level of madness. You remember before we went to the elections, the EACC flagged close to 200. How many of these 200, and you could actually see the red card list. We had the red card list out there. They said, let us forward these names to IBC. IBC said, look, we do not have the mandate to bar these people from running just because you've said
Are you telling us that as it is right now, as Kenyans, it would be foolhardy for us to expect any reasonable direction from our political class because we elected the worst of the worst, people who had been declared probably unfit to hold public office, but because our laws do not necessarily enable us to bar them from office, they ended up in parliament, and therefore we just sit back and enjoy. We should not expect anything better from them.
We should not. I will tell you that without fear of contradiction. And by the way, let me tell you, our problems in terms of political governance is not a question of the law. It's not a question of the law. This country is over-legislated. It is an institutional and societal question.
And the voter is right in the middle of that mess.
The voter is right in the middle of that mess. The voter in my village would tell you, I would rather vote for that person who has come giving me 100, 200 shillings because I do not have a job, than vote somebody who has come here with a whole array of policies, good policies. And let me say, at the center of this is also chapter 6 of the Constitution on leadership and integrity. And I've said time and again, the biggest obstacles to chapter 6 of the Constitution are our courts.
But I think we are allowing the voter to get away with a lot. We talk about chapter 6, some wording in the Constitution. Even as Kenyans, we understand the provisions of chapter 6. Yet we go ahead and elect people who definitely do not qualify, if at all you were to go with the true provisions of chapter 6. Are we therefore saying that we have no place for recourse as a Kenyan voter, that we created this problem ourselves? Don't come back again and seek direction from people you knew would never give you proper direction in the first place.
Fred, I'll speak as someone who was on the ballot. Akafanyiwa ile kitu. As Kenyans usually say. I used to blame, for the longest time, I used to blame politicians. I used to blame our leaders. But what we lack as a country is honesty, Fred. We as a people. We've talked about leaders being a representation of the people. Like my brother has said, step out there, Fred. Do an assessment, do a research. Ask Kenyans who voted, what was their motivation for voting for that person? There are 3 considerations. 1 is the money, 2 is the party, 3 party and party leader, 3 is the tribe. Those 3 things are the key determinants. The next question I ask myself is, Fred, where do you get the audacity or the moral standing as a person who was bribed to vote for someone, to question the character of that person when he's howling in the streets or lying to you or becoming a ghost worker? Most of these legislators are ghost workers. These people crying about the high cost of living are ghost workers. They don't go to work and they are paid. Where do you get as a person? Because as a person, I believe, and that's why I have a bit of a hesitance towards demonstrations, because when you listen to others more than you listen to yourself, then it's more about those that you listen to than yourself. I'll give you an example, Fred. You are very famous.
Am I?
You are very famous, Fred. But to go to a stage here in Kiambu and try to mobilize those borders to demonstrate the high cost of living without paying them, see if they will demonstrate. They may even chase you away and beat you as someone who is trying to destroy them, but there are voices that are heard. That's where opportunism comes in. So at the end of the day, we want to blame these politicians. And yes, they have their fair share of blame because they have a constitutional obligation. But I always say sometimes, when you bring 1 sheep from Mombasa, 1 sheep from Kisumu, 1 sheep from Trans Nzoia and put them in this room, they will all be sheep. That's why I talked about when we are talking about the police, I talked about the training that prepares them for. Politicians, there is conditioning. That conditioning includes the character development that the people subject you to. That's what converts them into that. He's talked about the lucrative nature of our politics. It's a process that starts with down there from the voter. So until as a people, we learn to listen to ourselves more, we become a bit selfish. And that's why I talked about chapter 1 and chapter 4 of the Constitution, When you go to the ballot, chapter 1 gives you the sovereign power, but then you are going to donate that power. The purpose of you donating that power in chapter 1 is so that this person can facilitate your acquirement of and enjoyment of chapter 4. Actually, I always tell people there are only 2 important chapters in the Constitution. Once you understand and internalize chapter 1 and chapter 4, you vote for someone using chapter 1, surrendering that, so donating that sovereign power so that that person can deliver on chapter 4, because chapter 4 is what covers our lives. So if Kenyans understood the contents of chapter 4, then they will go to the ballot and ask themselves, can this person guarantee my right to freedom of expression? Can this person guarantee my right to quality education, health? Can this person legislate in a manner that guarantees my security, guarantees the media? That is what we miss. And Fred, until we get to a point where as a people, we own the Constitution, we own those rights. And that's why I always say, if you don't understand chapter 4, the only right that you should be talking about is your right hand and your right leg.
And I do hope all the young people watching us are listening to this, an understanding of the law, an understanding of your responsibility as a voter. Don't come later in the day to start complaining about the quality of politicians that you yourself queued and elected.
You know, I was saying, sorry to interrupt you, I was saying, if you come to Kenya today, you will think we've never had an election. You wouldn't imagine we are not even one year after the election. People are acting like there was no election last year. God just threw, or God or Lucifer threw these leaders here, and nobody knows where they come from. That lack of introspection and retrospection. Fred, we have a population that blames everyone except themselves. And that is the problem that we have. But until we get to a point where we introspect and ask yourself, own your mistakes, become responsible, take responsibility, that's when we'll move forward. And that's why I was talking about history. We refer to history because we don't want to own up to our part in the wrong history that we are talking about. Because until you own up to your part in the wrong history that we have, you will never create the right future and the right history for future generations.
You look like you want to add something.
Yes, and I began by saying we are having an institutional problem. The center of it all are the people, you know. At the center of this conversation we are having here are the people. Is the manner in which we have not made our politics to be issue-based. And I do not see us making it, you know, that in the near future. Because
our politics will remain as is.
It's going to take a very long time. It's almost going to take a revolution, you know, to change the manner in which we play our politics. Because the people have been also wired and structured in such a way. As he says, you know, he went to the ballot, and he was told, by the way, you are a good man. We see you are a good man. But on this matter...
That's not what we need right now.
That's not what we need right now. I mean, we need something else.
We need the money.
But we don't want
the party and the party leader.
Yes.
And the tribe.
Yes, and our politics, as opposed to the global north, has been structured around people and political parties. People and political parties. I would tell you for sure that if he had a political party that was likable in that region, or that if he was seen to be around certain political figures more than the rest, that would have even been a determination to be given the ticket. We are not even reaching a point where somebody gets to the ballot to be given a ticket. And once that is done, it's almost over. And here we are, 9 months or so, less than a year after an election, and we are all crying. And by the way, let me tell you, Fred, we are crying, and in 2027, we are going to repeat the same mistakes.
Wow. Well, enough of blaming the voter. Yes, we agree the voter failed, and failed tremendously. Let me not even say miserably. But there's also the responsibility that comes with being elected into a political office. And definitely, however bad these people are, they're just a representation of the Kenyan society. They are brothers and sisters, the members of parliament. And I could say that in this National Assembly this time round, probably the number of young or younger members, elected members, is going up every single time. We have very many members who are in their early 30s, some of them in their late 20s who are representing constituencies. You go at the county level and you see the number of MCAs who are in the late 20s. They're quite a number. A lot of women in the late 20s are nominated members of the county assemblies. We have young women nominated to the Senate and the National Assembly as well. Yet, we expect that these are very brilliant minds, independent thinkers, that they can actually vote with their conscience and thoughts, and probably putting in mind the needs of their constituents or those people who sent them there. But we see a trend where if I'm allied to this party or coalition and we are called for a parliamentary group meeting, whether or not my constituents tell me otherwise, I will vote according to party lines. And it brings to question the independence of the kind of members of parliament we have. Do you think that this time, more than any other, our members of parliament are controlled from outside parliament, that probably the legislature is under capture of either the executive or the opposition coalition?
Thank you, Fred. My opinion is that, let me first say, let's not make Kenyans look like they were very wrong. Let's not disrespect them that much.
They knew what they were doing.
They knew what they were doing.
And they did so consciously.
The only problem is that they make choices without expecting consequences. 2, they elect people without knowing the roles of those people, without knowing the processes and procedures through which service can be delivered. And that's why we are having these issues, because most Kenyans do not know the process that leads to the process of legislation, the process that even can lead to policies and issues that lead to reduce the high cost of living. On the issue of political parties and independence, Fred, I want to bring to the attention of Kenyans that the principal tool of political mobilization is a political party. He talked about ideologies. There was a fair share of ideological politicking in the last election. I can say that for free. There was a conversation about the economy, trying to raise people from the bottom. There was an issue of social welfare. There was a fair share of mobilization. But was it consequential? There was a fair share of mobilization around ideas. 2, no candidate is under constitutional obligation to belong to any political party. And that's why there's even a Political Parties Act that outlines the character of conduct of people who choose to belong to political parties. That's why we even have the option of an independent candidate, who are the least independent, by the way. Anything in Kenya with the word independent
is the least independent.
On the issue of the political
on
the issue of the political parties, I will say this: political parties have an agenda. That agenda, as a person, if I was an MP or an MCA or a senator, I would ensure that the agenda of my constituents is in that, is in the agenda of the party. The problem there, why we say these politicians are captured, is because most of them, like I said, are ghost workers. If the agenda of your people is not in the agenda of the party, then you are chasing someone else's agenda. And that's why your people, because they are not represented in that agenda, they feel you are captured, you are not independent. Independence is not about shouting on your own. As a leader, I believe that you must collaborate. Even independent arms of government, there is interdependence among the independent. So as a leader, when you belong to a party or a coalition, to avoid, the only way you can be loyal to your party or party leader and still serve your people by ensuring that by the time that manifesto is being written, that policy is being passed, that law is being, that is your job, to represent your people. Representing your people is not representing them in funerals or in streets or in churches. Representing your people is ideological, so that whichever law is being passed in parliament, ensure that the interests of the people, of your people, are there. When there's a law to regulate water or the environment, When public participation is happening, collect the ideas of your people and insert them during committee meetings. Insert them as amendments in parliament. The moment you've done that, you will be aligned and loyal to your party comfortably, because the agenda of your people is in the big agenda of the party. I don't have a problem with my MP bowing down to the party or the party leader as long as part of our agenda is in. The problem we have is that this goes to workers. They don't have the agenda of the people. So you find that I ask myself, whenever a law is passed, I want to see my voice or the voice of my people in that agenda. So that's where the disconnect is. So for me, when you choose to belong to the party, you must belong to it wholesomely.
Okay.
It's your duty to ensure that your agenda as a leader and the agenda of your people is in that big agenda, so that you don't look like you're just a sheep following others.
Evans, your take on that?
Fred, I agree with him. But I just have to also point out that where we have reached as a country, Fred, we must have an honest conversation. The only way the people, your MP at home has only 3 roles when it comes to the national balance. That is oversight, legislation, and representation. And the one that they have done the worst is oversight, for, obvious reasons. You see, this structuring around political parties is amazing. If you recall, we had close to 14 independent members of parliament in the 2022 election. What happened immediately they were elected as independent MPs? They were at Karen, meeting the president and saying, we pledge our loyalty to you. Some of them, in fact, were not given tickets on the party of the president, and that is why they ran as independent candidates and won, because people believed in them to be carrying the bigger aspirations of the constituents than those who were elected on those parties. But immediately they got elected, they submitted, to a political party, because the Kenyan politics has been structured. And we are going to break that barrier. We have seen examples of members of parliament. Look at Senator Okiya Omtata of Busia. People said that when Okiya gets to politics, things will change. But I have patiently followed Okiya Omtata on all the most important bills of the Senate. Senator Okiya Omtata takes very, very independent positions in whichever debate that goes before the Senate. At one point, it was even said that, he's a sympathizer to the opposition. But when you look at the manner in which he has played politics from the beginning, he has actually shown that although we are having a problem, we are likely to change this trend. Right now, Fred, I can tell you there is no difference between the executive and parliament. There is no difference. And that is why you can even see that this is affecting the executive. The executive is crying, look, we are not the judiciary is crying, we are not getting enough budget. Why are they not getting enough budget? Because the legislature has submitted fully to the executive. It is like a remote control from State House being told, do this, and they do it. We are losing very good minds when they get to the House because of the manner in which our political parties are structured. Fred, there is a very thin line between party loyalty and sycophants in this country, and it doesn't really exist. If you can shout the name of your political leader, even if you're doing nothing on the ground, if you can just shout Raila Odinga, if you can just shout William Ruto, if you can shout to any of those tunes, you become a darling. And by the way, the day we break the politics around personalities and political parties, we are going to have a very different electorate. There are people, assuming Raila leaves politics today, there are so many people in Central Province, there's so many people in Rift Valley, there's so many people in other UDA strongholds who will lose their political seats. Why? Because their politics has been structured on insulting the opponent. You're not doing so much, but as long as you are vocal in insulting the opponent, then you are the darling of the people. Fred, tell me, how many bills do you know of in the National Assembly that your MP has passed? How many bills do you know of that your MP has passed? And that is not to say We have completely lost hope. There is no future. There is future. There are MPs who have done exceptionally well. Even in the other, I told you the example of Sakaja. The bills that Sakaja ran in the Senate when he was nominated and when he was the senator for Nairobi are very many. You know, actually we can actually count on the young generation. If you look at the young members of parliament, we can count on them to change this trend, Fred.
But the question is the understanding of the role of the legislator by the people, the voters themselves, and even those who have already been elected to these positions, because there appears to be a disconnect. And we go back to the law, the roles of the legislature, the role of the executive. There seems to be a thin line that people have already crossed. Yes, the executive appears to be controlling parliament, but it's because the legislators have lost the route to their job description, oversight, legislation, and the other one, representation. There's issues to do with the NGCDF. They're more concerned about development at their constituency level. So they're seeking direct funding from the executive and therefore ceding the floor to the executive. Yet the pressure comes from the voter. So this lack of understanding, is it an issue to do with our constitution? Is it something that we should revisit, that probably our understanding of the law and even what we need from our members of the National Assembly and the Senate, because even the senators are looking for a facilitation fund for them to perform their role. And that could simply just send them back to the executive and they do the same, cede ground to the executive.
I think there's an article I once published some 2 years ago in the People Daily where I was talking about if you want our legislators to work, disband CDF, disband this affirmative action. You cannot have a legislature that is co-executing and implementing projects. And that's why you realize that there's nobody to oversight CDF. No one can oversight.
Everyone is rushing to State House so that they can get development at their constituencies.
Yeah, and then you realize that they get away with their key roles through CDF. You realize all these people are focused on that 2.5%. It's 2.5% at the expense of the rest. So for me, and that's one of my greatest disappointments in IEBC is the lack of civic education. And that's why we realize 99% of Kenyans go to the ballot not knowing the reason why they are going to the ballot. They go to the ballot to either punish people or to reward people who have given them something. So we need to do a lot of sensitization to the people to understand the roles of their legislators. That's where they get that's where that issue of the line comes in, where you realize that because people have, I will always say they have absconded their responsibilities. And that's why there's something I always tell Kenyans. Today we don't have an opposition. We have a minority that is supposed to be ideological, bringing superior ideas or calling for the repeal of the bad ones with better ones. Today, like I mentioned, I was talking about having your ideas in the bigger plan or in the budget or in the law. That is, I covered representation and oversight, and representation and legislation, where you have your people's things in there. When we talk about oversight, unlike Kenyans have been misled to believe, oversight is not a responsibility of the opposition. Oversight is the responsibility of the legislator, wholesomely, where they passed a budget. It's their responsibility, regardless of party or coalition, to ensure that that money is utilized as expected. That is the information that needs to get to the people of Kenya. We can only rise from the bottom, my friend. And I'm not being political. We can only rise from the bottom. What we lack as a country is that knowledge at the bottom, that power at the bottom. People have it, but they don't realize the power that they have. So at the moment, we talk about the capture of the legislature. I don't consider it the capture of the legislature. I more of see it as a case where we elect people without understanding their roles. We give them a free card on whatsoever they can do. They use that free card to collect whatever pellets they can find to come and blind us. After we've been blinded, then they use that as the next catapult.
And it's a cycle.
And it's a cycle that as a people, and that's why I insist, let's stop over burying our heads in our history. Let's ask ourselves, we are here. We have the Constitution that talks about the right to recall and all that stuff. This person is wrong. And that's why I always tell people, before we even go to the president, is your MCA doing his job? Mm-hmm. We are talking about the high cost of living. Agriculture is devolved. Health is devolved. Are those functions working? And let's not talk about...
The question begs, because the Constitution is supposed to represent even the aspirations of the people. So if at all there's a misunderstanding between the people and the Constitution in what the legislator should do, shouldn't the people therefore revise that law? If at all we need a MP to be in charge of the development at the constituency level, then why have a constitution which allows MP or describes the job of the MP as legislation, oversight and representation? Why not have the MP actually deal with development at the constituency level? Because that is the people's understanding of the role of an MP.
Fred. That's a very important question. I remember that question was a very big issue at the Supreme Court, decision that actually told us, to the extent that members of parliament are in charge of CDF, it's unconstitutional. I want to begin from the point of saying oversight is not a role of the opposition, as my brother has said. And that is why the Constitution is worded very carefully. If you look at Article 96, it says the Senate shall represent the interest of counties. It does not say county. Mm-hmm. What in essence means is that today, if I'm elected the senator of my county, I am not representing my county of Homa Bay. Mm-hmm. I'm going to represent all the other counties and their interest. Now, in regards to members of parliament, and whether there is a misunderstanding of the people on what the role of a member of parliament is, I do not understand that to be the case, that there is a misunderstanding. I think we entrenched CDF for so long, since 2003. We entrenched CDF for so long that the people were made to believe that the only reason why, and that is why even until to date, although we have a CDF committee, a member of parliament campaigning his constituency will tell the people, by the way, if you vote for me, I'll give you bursaries, I'll give you this, and I'll give you this. I think even the Supreme Court indeed recognized the fact that, because what National Assembly was saying, we cannot declare this unconstitutional because it has been there from 2003. But then the courts have always said that the longevity of practice of a particular, the longevity of practice of a particular issue does not give it any legal legitimacy. It does not mean that it has been right all along, because it has been there.
The law is created to serve the people, not the other way around.
But you see, the problem here is, even if you are to go ahead and say, okay, let's change the structure of how CDF needs to be run within the law, who would do that? It's Parliament. Mm-hmm. I'm telling you, Fred, there are issues that are entrenched in the Constitution that would be very difficult. It would be very difficult to convince the people that, by the way, we are having a constitutional moment. Let us restructure how our Constitution is pegged and change, for instance, the roles of members of Parliament. BBI was a big thing. It was a big conversation. It was a big political, social, economic conversation. Mm-hmm. But it didn't see the light of the day. Yeah? So that tells you how weighty some of these issues are in the long term. So that if you are to have a conversation with the people today and ask them, my people, do you really want us to change the structure of the Constitution to remove this thing, to give this thing finally to the members of Parliament? It would take us the long route.
It is part of the proposals by the President in his memorandum to Parliament. Change the law. Definitely we are looking at, in the short term, at least another constitutional moment that we could have an opportunity 13 years later to relook at some of the provisions of the Constitution, and probably the role of the legislator should come in there. If we really feel that we need our legislators to be there, to be the ones conducting the funerals in our constituencies. Why not? What is so wrong with that?
Fred, you talked about revision of the law, and I would like to tell you that you cannot revise what you don't know.
We don't know that we have a problem.
Most Kenyans don't even know what is in the law. So they don't know the role of the MPs. So telling them to revise the role, it's like he's saying, tell those people that you want to remove CDF, they'll hack your head. So I think we need to understand that the purpose for which this thing called separation of powers came in is historical. But we are past that. Now I personally believe that with what we have, if we implement it the way it should be and the way it's envisioned, it can serve us very well. So that we have a president that is executing, we have a parliament that is legislating and oversighting, and we have a judiciary that is interpreting the law. That is what we should be aspiring for. Things like CDF were invalidated by devolution. So Fred, as we have these conversations, I think it's important to note that, like he has said, the fact that something, longevity does not validate something, and I also want to note that as a country, there are things we've normalized that should not. And this comes back to the citizens, where I call upon the citizens to sense it starts with you. We need to be alive to our responsibilities, duties as a people, so that because you cannot choose if you do not have the ability to measure and gauge. So as a people, as even we have this conversation, the simple thing should be, let's understand what is in this book. Even as we aspire to change its contents, because it's not cast in stone. And like you said, we can change it anytime, as long as we believe it's supposed to serve us. When we wake up and we feel like it's not serving its purpose. Like, I think one thing I picked from him in the earlier conversation is that this book is as confusing as it's helpful to Kenyans. And that's why I talked about the wholesome approach to this book. So you realize the truth is there's a way we need to revise this book so that we decide at what point do we apply this law? Should we apply it independently? Because when you listen to some of these adjudications in court, you realize article or section read together with. So then you realize there are so many articles in this constitution that even invalidate laws. You realize someone has been taken to court, but he's right. Someone has killed someone, or is suspected of killing someone, or even has been found guilty of killing someone, but his right to life must be protected, even though he took away someone else under those circumstances. So I believe as Kenyans, these conversations should be ours. And like I said, it should be more from us and about us. As a person, don't wait for someone to tell you that your right is here. You need to uphold your right.
You need to understand what's in
Take it from your own perspective.
Gentlemen.
The problem we have is that we wait for people to interpret for us. And people who come to interpret, especially politicians, they have their interests and they will...
Just like the Bible. Final word, Evans?
3 things, Fred. This is the time when the country needs sobriety. This is the time when the country needs political hygiene. This is the time when this country needs responsibility and God. We cannot continue the way we are continuing. And I'm finishing with the first conversation we had. The loss of lives that we have seen during this period are heartbreaking, and more so because we are at 30 deaths, Fred. That's a very serious thing. And most of them are young people who lose their lives in the struggle, either because of political manipulation or because they genuinely have issues, to do with cost of living and all these other issues. The police must exercise responsibility. The politicians must exercise a lot of political hygiene, and all of us as Kenyans, we must be responsible.
Thank you.
Fred, I would like to make a call to the young people of this country and let them know that all of us are blessed differently. The purpose for which God gave us those different currencies as our abilities to execute different roles is because we have different purposes in life. And those purposes cannot be achieved by virtue of external validation. I would like to call upon the young people to interrogate themselves and all Kenyans and ask themselves, in whatever undertaking you do as a young person or as a Kenyan, is it in line with the service of your purpose in this world as a person? Are you utilizing those currencies and abilities that God gave you for the greater well-being of your nation?
Okay.
Because the Lord's Prayer says, let it be on earth as it is in heaven. The simple point in that is that we should all strive to create a heaven on earth, where we no longer wait for manna, but we work to earn our manna.
Thank you so much, Kennedy Odweo, leadership and governance enthusiast, and Ndong Evans, public law analyst, young men with brilliant minds, helping us understand the state of the nation, the state of our politics, what is happening in Kenya right now. Thank you so much, and we look forward to hosting you again here on Morning Cafe. Right now, let's cross over to my colleague Flora for more updates. Flora?
Well, what a conversation, and definitely it is our aim to continue championing for the youth in politics, even as we envision being a strong voice as the youth of Kenya. But of course, it's a Friday, and it's an easy Friday. And later on, we will be getting into some entertainment. Of course, it's told you to send in some requests so that you can play your best songs and make a wrap up this week in style. But before that, let me look at what is on Pulse this morning. Quite an interesting one here. Stardom, these are some of the musicians who have decided to taking a break from their groups. Some musicians have found mega success by working alone, right? This is an article by Dan Kipchumba, of course, the likes of Nyanshinski, the likes of Benzema, and the recent split of the Sauti Sol group. That is a story we'll be discussing a little bit later. Also, what else do we have? Okay, just a minute. On the Pulse still, why Kenyan film? Let me see. Why Kenyan film industry is watching Hollywood strike. That is also something else we'll be focusing on. And of course, it's Friday, and we look at the songs making top songs this week. We'll be discussing that a little bit more, and also be looking at the Nairobian, what is going on in terms of entertainment. But for now, let me take it back to Freddie to give us the editorial comment, but do stick by. From 8 a.m., it will be all dance and style in this studio.
Thank you, Flora. Now, today we seek to address the appalling state of affairs in our beloved nation, Kenya. The political class, both in government and in the opposition, have shamelessly chosen to play politics for the sake of politics, while the ordinary citizen bears the brunt. As the masses grapple with the soaring cost of living and businesses struggling due to the anti-government protests, our leaders have shown themselves to be unable and unwilling to offer any meaningful solutions or even provide the leadership that this nation so desperately needs. Our nation requires strong leadership, not partisan bickering. Our political class needs to realize that playing politics simply for the sake of it comes at the expense of the very people who put them in office. The true point of politics should be to create a functioning and just society that serves the interests and well-being of its citizens. Politics serves as a means to govern, make decisions, and allocate resources in a manner that promotes the welfare of the entire community. We've heard countless promises from these politicians about a better future, a better tomorrow, about prosperity and growth. But where are the results? Where is the change they pledged to bring? We, the people, are tired of empty words and hollow promises. What we need now is action. We need our leaders to put aside their differences and find real solutions to the pressing issues our nation faces. To the political class, we say it is time to set aside your personal ambitions and work together to solve the issues plaguing our nation. And no, we are not in any way suggesting that you share power. Each of you, however,